sailors and soldiers in the War of 1812. Now, we haven't, we started history in 1750, but were there black men who fought in the Revolutionary War? Salem Poor, were there ones that actually supported both sides, thinking mainly if you supported the American side, I would receive my freedom? Really didn't work that well for African Americans or blacks or Negroes, right? Well, this was no different. Although there was little effort to recruit blacks, many black men took part in the War of 1812, again hoping to win their freedom. This is going to continue out through history. So although little effort was made to recruit blacks, many black men took part in the War of 1812, hoping to win their freedom. Now I'm going to give you 3 examples that show the importance of the black man in this conflict with Great Britain. I'm going to give you 3 examples to show the importance of the contributions of black men in the War of 1812 against Great Britain. Now, we talked about the path that the British were going to take: Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York. Well, political leaders in Philadelphia were also fearing that they would be seized by the British. And over 2,500 local blacks responded and helped secure the city of Philadelphia against British attack. So again, the black support was crucial in Philadelphia. Many political leaders in that city were fearing seizure by the British, and over 2,500 local blacks responded and helped the city secure Philadelphia from the British. That was the first example. Now, 2,500. Now, do you remember they talked about a crucial area that the British had taken? That was the right of deposit. New Orleans. And so we're going to talk about the Battle of New Orleans. But the second example is in Louisiana, General Andrew Jackson ignored the fear that most white officers had in arming black troops. At the time, white officers were concerned about arming black troops, thinking they may not be proficient enough, or they may turn those on them because at the point they are slaves. What better way to win your freedom, right? That's their thought. But Andrew Jackson, who was down in Louisiana and will fight in the Battle of New Orleans, he promised the blacks that volunteered the same pay as white soldiers. So he had great confidence in arming blacks against the British, and even promised them the same pay as whites. That's very ironic when we get into Andrew Jackson, that he was so supportive of blacks and so discriminatory against Native Americans. And it's kind of an incredible story. But he was very confident in the abilities of black troops, and he even promised black troops the same pay as white soldiers. Can you believe that? Way back in 1814. The third example is there was a captain, a naval captain, by the name of Oliver H. Perry, who also used blacks in his navy during the War of 1812. Captain Oliver H. Perry, a naval commander, used blacks in his navy during the War of 1812, and later wrote in his journals of his experiences commanding in the War of 1812 that blacks under his command, quote, seemed absolutely insensible to danger. Seemed absolutely insensible to danger. In other words, they were very, very brave. So, your first example is that black support was crucial in Philadelphia, as political leaders in that city were fearing seizure by the British, and over 2,500 local blacks responded and helped the city secure Philadelphia from the British. Second example is down in Louisiana and New Orleans. General Andrew Jackson, who would fight in the Battle of New Orleans, lead the American charge there, ignored the fear that many white officers had in arming black troops, and he even promised blacks that volunteered to fight with him the same pay as white soldiers. And thirdly, Naval Captain Oliver H. Perry, who used blacks in his Navy during the War of 1812, later wrote in his journals that blacks under his command, quote, seemed absolutely insensible to danger. In other words, they were very brave. Well, again, despite their contributions and bravery, very few slaves who fought in the War of 1812 were granted their freedom. Very few. Okay, we haven't talked about too many American victories in the War of 1812 yet, have we? Baltimore, you could call it a victory at Fort McHenry, but they were defending themselves. Did they defeat the British? Really? I mean, British gave up, right? So we're going to talk about some American victories in the War of 1812. Because the first 2 years of the War of 1812, we struggled, didn't we? Didn't the British attack the Atlantic seaboard? Didn't they occupy the nation's capital at Washington, D.C.? Didn't they ransack and burn several buildings in Washington, including the Capitol, the Library of Congress, the White House? Things weren't going real well the first couple of years of the War of 1812. Well, Americans did fight back in the area of the Capitol and gained control of the Capitol later. And because the Americans did gain control of the Capitol, the British strategy now in the War of 1812 was to win in the following 3 locations. They wanted to win in these 3 locations. One location was Lake Erie. Where's Lake Erie located, Ryland? You're kind of close here. Oh. Okay, here's Lake Erie right here. So they wanted to win in this area here. Okay? Okay. Another area they wanted to win was Lake Champlain. We talked about that before, didn't we? Who held off the British at Lake Champlain to help Washington get to White Plains, New York? Benedict Arnold. Very good. So that was another place the British wanted to win. And the most important place, which we'll spend more time on, was New Orleans. Now, if they win at Lake Erie, at Lake Champlain and New Orleans, they're going to squeeze everything in the middle. That's kind of their goal. So these are 3 important victories for the British and 3 important areas that America better defend. Now, America is going to need victories at Lake Erie, Lake Champlain, and New Orleans to, in most military leaders' mind, gain a stalemate with the British in the War of 1812. What's a stalemate? A tie. Okay? So they're in the ball game against Britain, and they're not looking to beat them in the score. They're looking to stalemate, just break even, because what has the British been known to do if you break even? Give up and leave. American Revolution is a perfect example, and this Battle of Baltimore. So we'll talk about the Battle of Lake Erie, which occurred in 1813. Battle of Lake Erie in 1813. Now, American forces were led by Captain Oliver H. Perry and his naval force at Lake Erie. And they defeated the British there. With the help of what? Blacks, black sailors. So, in the Battle of Lake Erie in 1813, America, who was led by Captain Oliver H. Perry and his naval forces, defeated the British. So there's one victory they needed. The second battle, the Battle of Lake Champlain, occurred in 1814. And the Americans were led by Army Captain Thomas Thomas McDonough, and his military troops. So in the Battle of Lake Champlain in 1814, the area of Lake Champlain was captured by Captain Thomas McDonough and his military troops. So we are 2 for 2 in winning important battles to turn this thing into a stalemate, right? What we will begin on Monday, and I want you to just write down the subtopic, is the Battle of New Orleans. This is a huge victory for the United States in the War of 1812, which is going to basically result in the end of this conflict with Great Britain. Is New Orleans a very important area to have if you're any country? Absolutely. So it's a crucial victory there that's going to make the difference. Who is the military leader that's going to be stationed at New Orleans to protect that port city? Andrew Jackson, an interesting fellow. And he's going to be there mainly with his Tennessee militia. He's not going to have a lot of support from American Army forces. And by the time we get to the Battle of New Orleans, the War of 1812 has been going on for nearly 3 years, and it will be General Andrew Jackson who will be ordered to protect the port city of New Orleans, and he's going to use mainly Tennessee militia volunteers. Yep.
So that's why they call it volunteers.
Yep, that's exactly right. Now, the British strategy at New Orleans, because they really don't know what's going on north, is they're expecting victories in Lake Erie and Lake Champlain, and the victory in New Orleans is to join forces with those victorious forces from Lake Champlain and Lake Erie, and they're just going to take an absolute pillage of this land in between. Unfortunately, the British are not really aware at the time of what's going on in Lake Erie and Lake Champlain. So this Battle of New Orleans is going to make all the difference, and we'll talk about that on Monday. All right. Perfect.